Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last panel of the day. If you weren't here earlier, my name is Marissa Trew. I'm the Senior Content Lead of Blockhouse and the host of Tez Talks Radio. And today we have kind of a bit of an all-star panel of a lot of the different entities that are very active within this ecosystem. So by way of introduction, we're going to start with Diane Drubay. You are the Head of Arts and Culture at TZ Connect. We have Mason Edwards, who's the Chief Commercial Officer of the Tezos Foundation. We have Alex Liu, who's the Director of Operations at Tezos Commons. And then we have Mark Soares, who is the founder of Blockhouse. So today's topic is Tezos, Built to Last. And of course, that's a very broad title for what we're about to cover today. And I think where we need to start is what each of the different entities we have on stage represent and what exactly it is that they do for the ecosystem. So Diane, why don't we start with you? What is TZ Connect?
So TZ Connect, and from my side, is actually supporting the artists and the different art and culture institutions and players. So supporting them so they can be onboarded on the Tezos blockchain and also experiment and explore how the technology can be used. What we are trying to do is to find new use cases and then to explore with them and develop the tools that they need. So it's really empowering artists and art players so they can use the Tezos blockchain for the best.
Fantastic. And Mason, can you tell us a bit more about the Tezos Foundation?
Yeah, of course. So the Tezos Foundation really exists to support the adoption of the Tezos blockchain technology. And it mainly does that through a grants process and through funding other ecosystem entities. But in terms of like you mentioned promoting the ecosystem and that kind of thing, my sense of this is always that that's best done by everyone here. The ecosystem really thrives on its developer community, its people who participate in the projects. That's what really grows things, and that's what we love to see, and that's what we try our best to support.
And Alex, share a bit more about Tezos Commons as an entity.
Yeah, we are one of the oldest entities in the Tezos ecosystem. Our main mission is really to build communities on top of Tezos, and we also have set up some infrastructure that a lot of the DApps in the ecosystem use. And then on top of that, what we really enjoy doing is throwing meetups and helping meetups get started up all over the world again.
And last but not least, Mark, share a bit more about Blockhouse.
So Blockhouse is probably a fairly new entity compared to some of the other entities on this stage. Started last year to help catalyze and amplify marketing initiatives, such as what we have here, hosting events, helping facilitate that, and also branding and marketing for a lot of the initiatives around the globe and around the ecosystem, whether that's PR, media, branding, social, and even catalyzing new projects and incubating new projects.
Fantastic. So obviously, a key word in the Tezos ecosystem is decentralization, and we have a huge community of different entities that actually work to grow this ecosystem, and also they find a delicate balance between their respective roles and mandates. So Mason, to elaborate further on how exactly the foundation works to support other entities within the ecosystem, beyond the grants program, what else is being done to sort of uplift and strengthen the community even further?
Yeah, well, I mean, the grants program is very fundamental because that obviously funds ecosystem entities that focus more on adoption, business development, building the core technology. So it's through those mechanisms that this happens. So it's a pretty global presence now with a lot of people who wake up every day and do what they can to support the different elements. And that can be a range of things. That can be from advice and conversations, from helping development efforts, things like this, for example, supporting tooling. I think tooling on the Tezos chain is now some of the best across all of Web3. And that's through the immense efforts of a lot of the people in this room.
Right, so the foundation actually has a very varied role in the overall ecosystem.
Yeah, I think you can't be in this space without being agile. And so that's kind of like the key word, right? You have to constantly assess like what is the valuable thing that can be done to support the organic growth we're seeing. And we think about that every day.
And Alex, Tezos Commons is, like you mentioned, it's one of the longest standing grantees of the Tezos ecosystem. So what is it exactly that makes it so strong?
So I think one of the toughest challenges for newcomers coming into the ecosystem is just kind of navigating the ecosystem and figuring out, if I need help on one certain issue, who do I go talk to? And part of our strength is that we are able to really connect them to where they need to be and just kind of shepherd that sort of process of connecting teams from teams and just help onboard people with the knowledge of the ecosystem.
And given it is one of the longest standing grantees, how has Tezos Commons grown from what it originally was to where it is now?
Yeah, we originally had about a team of 4, and now we are about a team of 12. And the turnover rate within our organization, we actually are pretty much at 0%, and it's been about 4 years now at 0%. But pretty much everyone on our team are very passionate about Tezos, and Tezos is just sort of like a passion play of ours. And I typically have to tell my team to take time off because they just always want to keep working and working and working. And I'm like, we need balance so that you stay healthy.
So everyone at Commons basically eats, sleeps, and breathes Tezos.
Yeah, got it.
And then Diane, TZ Connect, it also focuses on building open source software on Tezos. It's also got a very healthy developer environment. So I want to ask how TZ Connect actually works to create this open and encouraging environment for developers to come and experiment and actually test out the products that they want to build.
Well, first we listen. We listen to the users. We listen to the creators and to the players in the art market, and then we see what is actually needed. John this morning was presenting Canvas, which is an open source NFT store, which is already being used by a few players, and then they actually also tell us what should be implemented and how things should be updated. We also develop Very, which is actually the equivalent of proof of attendance for Tezos, because we organize a lot of community meetups and exhibitions, and this is something which is really, really relevant, and also because we work with museums and foundations. It's really what they're looking for, being able to follow the attendance and then create some kind of new membership.
And TZ Connect has a very strong relationship with its developer network, but as you were mentioning earlier, beyond the developers, it's also very much tapped into the arts communities and the culture communities, especially through your role. So how do you find the balance between and connect the dots between those two and develop the relationship between the arts and culture community and this very tech-focused community?
Well, it's all about listening, and then it's all about prototyping and building. So we have one program which is called WAC, Web3 for the Art and Culture, and it started with 25 weeks of listening, so talking with museums and galleries and artists and trying to better understand how they can use Web3 for the art and culture. Then a long fellowship, 8 weeks fellowship with museums and festivals, and then a 1 month hackathon on Gitcoin, where we had beautiful submissions and 5 beautiful bounties and winners that are actually already being used by institutions. So it's really the whole process: listening, understanding, then developing, prototyping, and building.
It's very communicative.
And organic.
And then I think, organic relationships are obviously the most fruitful because they have the stronger foundations. Mark, to bring this conversation over to you, Blockhouse has a very interesting role within the Tezos ecosystem. It manages Tezos as a sort of global brand in a way. But as a non-sentient technology, what actually goes into the construction of this brand behind it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting challenge for a marketer, because marketing is typically very, you have a vision and you follow through with it. And with a blockchain, it's very different, because there's a little bit of fuzziness in the brand, and that's okay. Decentralization has redundancy built in, and you have to accept a margin of fuzziness, because there's a lot of different stakeholders that have a different vision as to what the brand is or what it means to them. And that's actually the beauty of decentralization. So you have to accept a lot of different inputs and prepare or produce messaging and branding that is generally in line with the overall direction. And I think the thing that makes marketers most uncomfortable, traditional marketers, is this maybe the lack of complete control. But in this space, it's a parameter that you just have to accept. And it's actually a beautiful thing. And what that means is juggling a lot of different requests from the ecosystem. There's different regions that we support, different teams that come to us with different needs. And you kind of have to be a generalist. You have to do a little bit of everything, from advertising to PR to web to events, and kind of get a feel for where the community is at, and then try to deliver to the best of your ability within the constraints you have, a brand that is consistent. And I do fully admit that means not everyone is happy all the time, but that's the fuzziness factor, and that is actually okay, because it means that as long as the majority is appreciating the efforts and understands what Tezos is for and who it's for, then you're succeeding from a marketing standpoint.
And this alludes back to the flexibility, the agility that Mason, you were mentioning earlier. And I think we should actually coin margin of fuzziness as a technical marketing term. I think that's something we should all adopt. But in this constant negotiating, it's like a constant iterative process on trying to not only refine, but keep the brand broad enough that it's all-encompassing. How do you know when you find a sort of equilibrium where everyone's at a calm and everyone's quite content with the messaging that's being put out about Tezos?
Well, you have to listen to the community. That's really what it boils down to. You always have to pay attention, and that's the thing that most agencies, if not all of them, they just don't get. You actually have to live in the space. Myself, I started with Tezos in 2017, just as a member of the community. I live and breathe it. I very much completely understand Alex's comment about taking time off. It could become kind of an obsession.
Right.
But it's important to really live and breathe the category, because you can't really fake it. An agency that walks into this space and says, I'm going to deliver what you want, trust me, they cannot possibly even imagine what that means. It's about listening to the stakeholders, understanding the priorities, helping prioritize, and then monitoring, evaluating, and adjusting on an insane timescale that most agencies and brands just simply cannot execute on. So. Yep. Yeah,
and I think one of the most beautiful things that everyone can collectively agree on about the Tezos ecosystem is very much like a mosaic. There are so many individual component parts that actually contribute to create an even greater whole. And with the entities on stage, every entity on here is connected to many other entities, and it's sort of this, this broad network effect. So what do each of your entities respectively do to make sure that you can uplift perhaps the smaller community players who need a bit more support than others? Diane, why don't we start with TZ Connect?
I would say that we organize community meetups. We have a community space which is called D-Space, and we organize workshops. We gather the community, we gather the people locally, and we listen. Again, that's really about listening and about caring. And then we actually see what we can do together. We have a space where people can come and work as well. We have mentors available, and we have a small grant program. We also have artists coming and researching how they can use blockchain for their own artistic practice. And we basically sit down on the sofa and we talk and we find what we can do together. So it's a lot of time, but as I said, a lot of care as well, and showing that we are all there together. And we can just all support each other. Whatever the title or the entity, it's all about finding the right team to actually create something together.
Right. And Alex, you were mentioning earlier that Tezos Commons almost acts as a forum. It invites new ideas, discussions, and it also encourages people to ask the key questions that they perhaps need help on. So what are some of the products that are coming out of Commons to help address those questions or make them readily accessible to people?
Yeah, so we basically moderate most of the social media channels like Telegram and things like that. And we basically, are online pretty much 24 hours a day, so we can cover the full entire globe and making sure that when people ask questions or have tech questions or want to reach out because they have an idea for something, we're always there listening, and hopefully that, we can make something work and introduce them to the right people. On top of that, we also have a very we provide a lot of educational material, like we host Tez Talks. We have Tez Talks Radio and Tez Talks Live, and we try to have guests on from ecosystem, from builders to NFT artists to just anyone that's pretty much any sort of Tezos-related content.
Right.
And we try to make sure that we can basically help promote them and just make people aware of what they're doing, or what the next protocol upgrade is about, why it's significant, and things like that, just so that everyone has that educational material and that material in front of them, so that they can kind of branch off from there.
So Commons basically always positions itself as a very active member of ongoing discourse in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And another I guess, sort of communication venue that we help run is Tezos Agora, which is kind of where like all of the deep thinking thought leaders in the Tezos ecosystem really just kind of chat about ideas, and they kick around ideas and bounce ideas off of each other. And sometimes some of the discussions can get a little heated, but I think when they're heated, it just shows that how passionate the community is about Tezos. And so, I don't think it's always bad, but sometimes, tensions rise, but ultimately at the end of the day, everyone just kind of always gets along, and everyone's so passionate and everyone has so many ideas. So I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever any shortage of passion in the Tezos ecosystem. And then Mason, from your position in the foundation, obviously the foundation's doing a lot of work, for example, with the permanent art collection, and it's also positioning itself in a way where it's engaging with the projects that are looking to build on Tezos, but it's also engaging with the broader community who are interested in the blockchain space. So to take, the permanent art collection as an example, can you tell us a bit more about that and why that is so significant?
Yeah, I'm happy to. But the first thing I'd like to say is that there's a lot that happens across this extremely broad ecosystem that we try and do to bring everything up. But the reality is that when you have something that's growing really organically, like this ecosystem has, that's much more meaningful than trying to flash grab a community. And so it's really about like what can we do to support that organic growth, and what you get from that is you get these entrepreneurs, builders, users, members of the community who are very interested in the next thing. They're not here for a one-ride pony, and that means that what we're seeing is this massively growing art community, which has been supported by things like the permanent art collection as one of many factors. Starts to look at like, well, we're creatives. Why aren't we now thinking about gaming as well? And I kind of liken this a bit to the growth of Apple. When you capture this vibrant creator audience of people who really want to build stuff, what you end up with is just this compounding effect. And so that's why I think like adoption is always the metric we should really push for. And so like the permanent art collection is a nice way to support artists in this space who are minting their first few pieces, some renowned, some not. But it's really just one of many factors. And I kind of see like a bit of the role here is like, look, it's like Michelangelo's David. David was always in the stone, and they just had to chip away the bits around him. And it's like, okay, so we'll give you all chisels. Go away and make some Davids.
That's a very tidy metaphor. I like it. And then, Mark, for the branding side of things and the marketing side of things, like I said, this is a complex mosaic. There are so many different entities, so many different projects being built on this technology. How do you use marketing power to make sure that these see the light of day?
Yeah, so sometimes you have to take risks, which we do on a regular basis. Using art as an example, last year when it was around March timeframe, when Hikanuke really exploded in terms of activity and the NFT movement really took off, one of the things that we recognized at Blockhouse around the April-May timeframe was that it would be important to have a platform to showcase the artist community and the platforms like Hikanuke or Object or others. And so we actually synced up with Art Basel when we connected and set up an arrangement there. And it was in anticipation of this organic movement, then having a platform to actually, in a more traditional venue, but to legitimize the movement a little bit more. So we're trying to do both things at once, which was help grow the organic community that was already started, and then give it a place to really shine. And that ended up working out quite well. But it was, I'll fully admit, there was a gamble. because we didn't know if NFTs would still be around in 3 months. Nobody really knows. So we could have regretted that decision, but it ended up working out quite well, and it's worked out pretty well for platforms like highlighting objects, the artist community, NFT community, and platforms like FXHash in recent Art Basel events. And we've since expanded. So we try to build common ground where different teams in the community can actually shine and be exposed to mainstream and large number of users.
Right.
That can then be onboarded and be educated on what makes Tezos special. And we'd like to make those products front and center rather than anything else. Because for any of us to really win, the blockchain has to become invisible. I hate to say it. I know there's developers in the room, and I love what you guys do. But if you really succeed, then
it becomes ubiquitous.
It becomes so seamless that people won't really truly see and admire your work, and that's actually I think the biggest measure of success. So we try to actually make experiences like what you see here, and admittedly not perfect because it's still early and it's still being developed further, but experiences where you can gift NFTs at events and really kind of stress test the technology and come up with new ideas as well. And then beyond that, of course, through support with PR, media, advertising when possible. Understanding, of course, there's regulatory parameters that we have to follow as well.
Right.
But generally providing support when necessary for the ecosystem.
Right. So bridging the projects that are being built to mainstream awareness, which adds a layer of legitimacy, and once they shine, then the technology can shine along with it.
Actually, one thing I would add to that is it's a really fine balance, because you want to help all the ecosystem teams, but you have to be really conscious not to atrophy their natural marketing instincts.
Right.
Because it's one thing to help, but it's one thing to coddle. And if you coddle, then it won't scale. So that's something that's really, really important to understand. The teams, it's more important to teach marketing and educate on best practices and try to bootstrap internal efforts as well than completely managing, because otherwise it simply doesn't scale. That's the other thing.
Right. So it's offering them the ability to learn and adapt and actually curate their brand as to how they see it fit, as opposed to what Blockhouse dictates they think it should be.
Yeah, and I mean that's the nature of decentralization. You can't really be so prescriptive, and that's where the fuzziness factor comes back in.
Fuzziness factor, the margin of fuzziness, I think it was. So of course this panel is known as Tezos Built to Last, and I think a lot of the argument that circulates in public discourse is the fact it's down to its upgradability, its on-chain governance, its energy efficiency. So one question I want to address to the entire panel is, why do you believe these are such fundamental characteristics that will contribute to Tezos' strength both now and in the future? Open to anyone who'd like to jump on it first.
Cool. Yeah. So I've been an engineer for a while, and I've got to see a few different technology like hype cycles and things like that. And one of them was 3D printing. And I think the thesis that I drew from that was it's extremely hard to know exactly what requirements the future will have of a technology standard. And so if you're going to play the game of innovation, you want to be on something that can evolve and adapt. And that's always going to be the winning strategy. And so that's one of the reasons why I think that Tezos is demonstrating time after time its ability to upgrade rapidly and effectively is extremely important for building the next set of features that are going to be required, scaling being a perfect example, but also for institutions when they want to play in this game. They're not going to play in the rocky landscape of when will we upgrade?
Right. And Diane, as it relates to having these conversations with broader community partners in other industries, especially in arts and culture, who aren't necessarily as technologically minded, how do these qualities translate into the conversations with them that consolidate Tezos as a strong technology in their minds?
Well, the sustainability aspect of it, it's key, really, really key. It's a game changer for most institutions and artists that we are actually in touch with. And then, you have to understand that art and culture players, they have actually this timeline which is so different from the blockchain timeline. They actually plan for next year, or they plan like let's take museums. They actually plan their exhibitions in 3 years, in 5 years from here, from
Right.
now. So we need to be sure that the technology will be still here.
Right.
And big question about preservation, big question about conservation, how to actually preserve a crypto artwork that that a museum is acquiring, how to make sure that all these beautiful art pieces, we will enter a permanent collection of museums very soon, will be able to be exhibited in 10 years, in 15 years. That's a key question that museums are having with net art, for instance, and they have the same question with blockchain-based art. So being able to know that it won't break is really key. And that's really something that I'm always highlighting. And also, when you see that strong institutions and strong artists are already playing on Tezos, this is also bringing this lasting effect.
Right.
It's you have to have key players showing that it is actually made to last.
Right.
To have everyone else follow, basically.
So it adds to the legitimacy that we were discussing earlier.
And credibility, definitely.
And then Alex, in Commons, obviously, being such an active community forum where so many of these discussions are taking place, are these qualities sort of just accepted and therefore the conversations evolve past this point, or is it a constant reminding process that this is what makes Tezos so fundamentally strong?
I think it's a constant reminder, and a common trope that we hear from the community as a community-based organization is that you hear a lot of people say that, I'm in it for the tech.
Right.
And when they say that, they really mean by, because Tezos were able to upgrade at such a rapid manner that we will always have, the state-of-the-art sort of technology that will always keep us competitive, and that, if there's any sort of new technology that comes out, especially in the blockchain world, that we see as great or as good, we can always implement it into Tezos. So we're always, being sort of adaptable and staying on that front of being state of the art.
And then as we connect that conversation to that of mainstream public awareness, Mark, do you find yourself having to reinforce that message over and over again because people are coming in at so many different levels of understanding of what this technology is? Or do you see a route where we can kind of move past this and that will just be accepted truths that we can then evolve from or upgrade from?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a challenge because when you tell people, hey, this blockchain can evolve seamlessly, they're like, why wouldn't it? It's software,
Right.
And it's such an obvious thing, and it's the kind of thing that I think everyone in this room, if you've been in Tezos for a while, you're probably the super rational type where you look at something and you're like, yeah, this makes sense. Why would you have to fork in order to upgrade a piece of software? And I know that probably makes people very frustrated because you're like, how does this not make sense to you? Because it's perfectly logical. And so that's one of the challenges where you're explaining to people, all the other blockchains, they can't really do this. They don't have the mechanism for arriving at consensus through on-chain governance that makes Tezos so elegant. And so you have to kind of bridge the two topics where if it's somebody completely new to blockchain, you obviously have to tell them what a blockchain is, and then you have to explain why it doesn't do it,
right,
and why it's so important that it does it, right? And believe it or not, when I talk to brands and institutions and even people in the space, they are a little surprised that this actually matters. Like, if I were to talk to just people in the category, and they ask, what are the 3 top main points of Tezos? Energy efficiency, low transaction fees, and the ability to evolve. And the ability to evolve specifically, brands care a lot about it because if you fork a chain, the NFTs end up into locations, just like Arthur mentioned on the first day of the event. That piece alone is enough to terrify any brand into jumping into the NFT space because it means you have an infinite liability of supporting all these different chains that may or may not happen. And from a risk standpoint, nobody wants to do that. So legal teams at very large corporations, they simply, they don't want that as the only option. So they do consider that an important factor when deciding which blockchain to select. And in fact, some of the largest brands that are using Tezos specifically selected it because of that, because it means that much to them. And I think that, again, even though it's obvious to us, it may not be obvious to others, but it really matters and it compounds over time. And of course, the ability to evolve on top of that. It's a bonus, but the ability to keep the community together and make decisions collectively, I think is the real advantage of the technology and why it'll stick around forever.
Right. So in that sense, engaging with brands is very much an exercise in explaining what makes it sustainable in the long term without necessarily taking them down to this technical rabbit hole that's going to potentially confuse them even further and dissuade them even further from engaging in technology just because it gets a little bit too confusing. And I mean, on the broader level, it could be argued that blockchain as a technology in general is suffering a bit of a marketing problem, especially given the industry at large has a few challenges as of late, to put it diplomatically. So what do you each personally believe really does, let me rephrase, what do you each personally believe Tezos has in its favor that's not only going to help it survive at this point in time, but actually thrive in the future?
Oh yeah, I mean, meaningful adoption. Right, like the value of the network is the value of the things being built in the network to some extent, right? Not entirely, but it's a huge part of it. And we're seeing not just this plethora of really interesting projects and innovations happening, but we're seeing like ones with meaningful value. I think the fine art example is just, it's very obvious. Like for a long time, blockchain felt like this technology that was in desperate search of a use case beyond the obvious kind of payment rail stuff. And I think art was the first one where I sort of thought, yep, that makes a ton of sense. And if there's people who are extracting meaningful value from that, then they're also going to be inclined to care about the long-term existence of the chain itself. So I think that's the reason why it's so important to encourage and promote these communities. And going back to your point about like forking, it's another example of why Tezos is a fantastic and the premier chain for fine art. Because if that matters for a brand, I mean, it matters for an old masterpiece. Not that they're around to make NFTs anymore, but there'll be new ones.
Right. Alex?
Yeah, I would say, as a community-based organization, it's really the community. And there's what you see going on in the community is there's a very strong sort of openness of the community members that are always willing to help another person get started, especially when you look at the NFT community. I will see on Twitter someone saying, oh, I'm thinking about, minting my first NFT on Tezos. And then all of a sudden within, 20 or 30 seconds, you see about 15 replies to that. Oh, like I can help you out, get you started. Like, go here, check here. And it's just always there's always that helping hand, and that kind of showcases our community of the strength of it is just really based on the helping hand and helping others. And I think that is one thing that is very attractive to new people coming in, because it may be, that gap of getting started may be a little high, but it becomes much easier when you have that people helping you out and people being encouraging and just helping each other, basically bootstrapping each other and lifting each other up.
Yeah, and you see that with the social side. Like, Tezos is routinely in the top 5 socially spoken about chains and second for art. And what's interesting is when you do this and you look at the comparison, like, okay, not just that, but what's being said. And you get to do a side-by-side comparison of the communities. Like, it's pretty obvious which community you want to be a part of, especially if you're actually interested in doing something.
Mark, Diane, would you like to add anything?
Well, definitely community, definitely art, but also because people are having fun. Like people on Tezos, like they love to explore, they love to experiment, they love to test new things and see what works and doesn't. Type.art is just so funny. You can create NFTs with font, and people are so creative because there is no border, nothing actually stopping them. Like the Bidoo was super funny as well. Now everyone is having fun with the Trash Art Day. People are having fun, and that's really making the difference in a society which is really full of anxiety and no ideas about what the future will be about. So people are having a lot of fun on a daily basis, and I think this is very, very strong. It is creating very strong bonds between all these different communities, and as you said, it's a very benevolent and supportive community. And of course, the tech is enabling that. It's empowering the creators, but the people they will be there. They are staying, definitely. And every week there is something new happening.
Right.
And yeah.
And Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think the community, pound for pound, and I know there's tribalism in this category, but pound for pound, I put the Tezos community up against anybody in terms of passion. What I'm surprised about, though, and having been a community member for a long time, is I would never have guessed how cool, in terms of the grunge factor, that the Tezos community kind of embraced with Hick and Nuke and Taya and Object and Type.art and FX Hash and all these platforms. They're just freaking cool. They're cool, right? They have a real authenticity, and they're grungy and raw and punk, and I love that. And I would never have predicted that. Like day one, entering into the Tezos ecosystem, just as a community member, I would never have guessed that.
Right.
I would, super rational, kind of selecting the technology because it makes sense, and then here we are. I think potentially the envy of the category in terms of our street cred for the grunge factor from the artist community and just the passion that the ecosystem has. I think there's a lot that could be done to build upon that.
Right.
But that coolness factor is actually really, really, really difficult to manufacture from a brand standpoint.
Right.
Which is why I kind of bring it up, because if you're any other blockchain and you're trying to get this kind of element in your brand, good luck.
Yeah, you can't force that.
Yeah, and it doesn't start overnight. It takes a long time, and it takes dedicated, passionate community members to actually build it.
Right, so within that question alone, we have the robustness of the technology as a core technology, we have the supportiveness of the community, we have the culture of experimentation and creativity, and we just have the fact that it's straight up cool to be a part of this community. So I feel like in that we've captured what makes Tezos such an interesting arena to work within. But then, going forward, what can we do to reinforce this strength further? What else is there to be done that we can't lose sight of as we continue to build this infrastructure?
Well, to my mind, is actually giving more a playground and documenting more. So being able, each time something is being done, having the right documentation and the right tools so everyone can actually use them and tweak them and hack them. Having just a beautiful playground. So that's why we do so many hackathons. That's why we have so many meetups. That's why we organize so many pop-up events. So we can just test and try again. But it's really about constantly supporting people. Each time they want to be creative, they have to feel that someone is here to actually reply to their question. Even if it's super technical and super complex, at least someone is here to listen and then try to find a solution.
So making sure we always have the resources and the tools available for those that actually want to create on this platform.
Yeah.
It's chisels.
Chisels. Keep giving people
but also,
more chisels.
Amplification as well. Like, you got to amplify what's there rather than trying to create something out of nothing. And I think the other thing that's not mentioned enough is probably the scaling strategy. Like, the rate of growth is astonishing, and we're starting to see the burgeonings of new applications that will demand even higher usage. And so I think the scaling strategy is incredibly important. And there's from Arthur's keynote, as we all heard, a really substantial and meaningful plan in place for that. So I think that's going to be the big next thing that will help.
Yeah, I think it's really just a lot of this helping hand and the spirit of just being charitable and helping each other that really helps bond the community. And then what you're also seeing is that they pass it on. So if someone helps you, then when you see someone else needing help, they will, reach out and help them, and it just kind of creates this effect where people just keep helping each other and keep passing it on,
and paying it forward.
Yeah, sort of like just doing good and helping each other.
And Mark?
I think that you need. So the platform is solid. The tooling is great. It's built to last, but you do need builders in order for it to last. And I think attracting more builders will be important. I'm reminded of what Adrian mentioned in his previous talk, which is we need a hit DApp, right? To actually attract a huge amount of mainstream users.
The killer DApp, as it were.
Killer DApp, yeah.
Right.
And I think that's really important in order to really stress test the product and attract the next wave of users. again, I fully believe that in order for you to win and succeed, the blockchain will have to become invisible. You just focus on a really seamless user experience. But I think our next collective challenge is to ideate on, I think Arthur also mentioned this, the mid-level or the mid-layer products that are really essential and attract more builders. And I think events like this are really good because you can kind of interface in person with a lot of different builders and come up with new ideas, and synergies come out of that. And we need more of these types of events in order to catalyze that further. So, yeah.
And on the kill adapt, like, I mean, obviously we need to encourage more and more and more, and people to build more things. But you know, being in the position I'm in, I get to see a lot of cool stuff in the ecosystem, just being my day job. And you know, I'm pretty sure it's out there already, and it's just waiting to break out. Like, we have some really exciting projects that are getting a tremendous amount of traction. So I don't think this is a when someone going to build the killer thing. I think the killer thing's in the water right now, and we're just waiting for it to blast out.
Right. I'd now like to open up to the audience, and if there are any questions in the audience before we actually wrap up for the day. Yes, we have one here.
So, what you were saying earlier about not... First off, thank you, guys. From a marketing perspective, as a developer, I feel like there's a really big gap between teaching a developer to market who just looks at it and goes, and doing the job for them. So I was wondering if, like, what does that look like now? Where do you think that's going?
Yeah, so it's funny because the other day I was thinking, I don't know what's harder, to teach a developer to market or to teach a marketer about blockchain. I genuinely don't know which one is more difficult. I do think there's less marketers than there are developers, and therefore we have a need to attract more marketers to help the different teams and build up that support structure as well, because it's a scaling thing. It's also in the ethos of decentralization to have multiple efforts that are marketing, and of course understanding that the more marketers there are, the fuzzier it could get. But regardless, it's really important to have proper go-to-market strategies, timelines, assets that can help support launches and bring each product to life in the best way possible. And I think what we try to do is help bootstrap it, but because of the very large amount of increase, we can only offer a starting point, and then it's required to have the partner actually take the lead and go to market further. And that's where there's a gap and further support is needed. I think we should, from an individual team standpoint, we should try to incubate more marketing expertise and then collaborate with teams like Blockhouse and others to help support on a local level. I think that will be really important. And it's the kind of thing you want to do, because otherwise, nobody wants one team to be directing everything all the time. First of all, it's not possible. It's too much. And second, somebody else may have a great idea, and they should be able to push forward with it. So,
No, I mean, if the killer DApp is out there, we need the marketing to blow it up. Thank you, guys.
And I think we probably have time for one more question. Last chance. Okay, well, thank you everyone for all of your perspectives, and I think it's been really helpful to help people understand how different entities are thinking about Tezos and how they want to take it into the future. So for that, thank you very much for your insights, and of course, thank you for everyone for dialing in. This was a bit longer than scheduled, but I hope it was fruitful for all of you. If you have any questions, we're going to be around. Have a great afternoon.